So thank you. Welcome to you all, and thank you for your leadership in this.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Treena, and welcome everybody to this town hall on the guaranteed livable income. Thanks to Treena and the whole PMR staff for making these town halls possible too, particularly in COVID time, but it has been such a blessing, and I've heard that from so many people, just to have an opportunity to continue to behave like a body, to hear from each other, to stay connected in this time. So we're really grateful, in addition to the great AGM that happened this weekend, we're grateful for these opportunities as well. So I've met a number of you, but for those of you I haven't met, my name is Rhian Walker, and I'm one of the lead ministers at St. Andrew's Wesley United Church in Vancouver. And before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge that I live and work and play and pray on the unceded and traditional territories of the Semiahmoo Nation here. And our church is located on the traditional and unceded territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh. So I'll just invite you to take a moment to put which territory you are walking on today. And also, this is a great opportunity to use the chat too, to share any reconciliation work that you are engaged in. We will do so much better as a church if we share this work and support each other in this ongoing journey to truth, to healing, and to change. So I'm here today as a volunteer and probably just type A enough to be a timekeeper during this town hall, which is why I drew the short straw for this particular role. But I'm thrilled to be here to talk with you about the national campaign for a guaranteed livable income, and to ask the question, how does a country like Canada that is full of abundance still have nearly 5 million Canadians who are living in poverty? And how do we as a church reconcile our ideal that if one of our members suffers, we all suffer together, and if one of us is honored, we are all rejoiced together? How do we hold our Christian ideal of justice and reconcile it with that reality? And so today we have a roster of speakers who are going to share some information and some stories about the topic. And by the end of the session, before you go, we're hoping to leave you with 3 concrete actions that you and your congregation might take on to be part of this wider movement of advocating for a guaranteed livable income. And I know some of us are really well versed in the topic, and for some of us, this is like our first introduction. So I want to let you know that we do have some materials we can send you if you're interested. And Sarah and Rebecca will be putting links in the chat that will allow you to find information. But if you don't capture those, afterwards you can contact us, and I'll introduce us in a moment. So you can certainly get more information after. Our speakers today are going to be former moderator Lois Wilson and chair of the National United Church of Canada Guaranteed Livable Income Committee, who's going to be sharing with us what is happening on the national level. We'll also have Harvey Stevens, who's a senior policy analyst from the University of Manitoba, who's going to walk us through some of the specifics, and he has a 2-pager that's really helpful if you would like that afterwards. I'd like to welcome Jodi Dean, who I can't see, but I know is here on my screen, who is going to bring us some of the lived experience of that Ontario pilot project that was unfortunately canceled before the pilot was over, which was a real loss. But I'm looking forward to hearing what the lived experience was of that pilot, even in its short stages. And then at some point, we're going to have Senator Kim Pat, who is an adjunct law professor, but who's been gathering together a bunch of senators to push for a guaranteed livable income, especially right now when we've had the experiment of CERB. So what you have today basically is saints, prophets, and rabble rousers. So we're in great company for that. Like I said, I'll timekeep. Well, there'll be hopefully 2 opportunities for questions. But I'm just here to do that piece. I want to take a moment quickly just to acknowledge the real energy behind today's town hall, which is this little BC organizing committee, which is led by Barry Morris from the Longhouse, and he has gathered together Judith Hardcastle, Sarah Higgins, and Rebecca Knight from St. Andrews in North Van, just to make it confusing. And both Rebecca and Sarah have been doing amazing organizing and communications work around this. So thank you to both of you for that. And then Gary Paterson from St. Andrews Wesley has been part of this too. And we've just been doing sort of the ad hoc organizing. There are a number of churches that participated in the April Day of Action, the memorial or vigils towards the guaranteed livable income, and that was happening all across the country. So just a quick shout out to some of them: Canadian Memorial, Bethany United, James Bay, Trinity United in Prince George, Mount Seymour, and many more. Thank you for taking action that way. So let's just take a moment to pray, if we could, and just to gather ourselves and say, thank you, Creator God, abundant God, who calls us into ministry in this time and place, who calls us to love and to agitate, to care and to act. Be with us now as we open ourselves to a discussion on something that connects us to your abundance and to your longing for justice here in this time. And equip us to live faithfully in our communities and to be your light, never extinguished in the world. Amen. Gary, may I invite you to introduce Lois, please?
Okay. Well, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce Lois Wilson, who probably needs no introduction at all, but I'm still going to say a few things. Just to point out that she became an ordained United Church minister in 1965. In 1980, she was the first woman in our denomination to be elected to lead the church as moderator, 1980 to 1982. She spent a lot of her energy being involved in the student Christian movement, in community justice seeking and advocacy. She became a senator in 1998, and she has held other government positions, and she received the Companion of the Order of Canada. And she's probably going to look at me cross-eyed and say, will you stop? But I had the honor of phoning Lois a couple of months ago on the occasion of her 94th birthday. And she told me, because I'm looking at retirement, well, you have maybe 20 years to do good work. And enough of the birthday greetings, we need to do some work. So I probably won't say more by introduction, other than to say, Lois, we are delighted to welcome you to this town hall. And we're very grateful for your insight and your energy and your example. And as Rhian pointed out, you are chairing the National UCC GLI Committee. I love those acronyms. And you are an inspiration to me, thinking, okay, so 20 more years, Gary, work to be done. So we're hoping that you will be able to respond to 3 questions that I think will be helpful for all of us, explaining why the United Church did pick the issue of the GLI as a national priority, and what does the GLI campaign, what do we hope to achieve, and are we collaborating with others? And thirdly, what actions have we already undertaken, campaigns or letter writing or vigils? So why is it a priority? What do we hope to achieve and with whom? And what action have we already taken? Lois, over and out to you. You need to unmute. You need to unmute yourself. Great.
Am I okay now?
And I will now mute myself.
Okay, good to see you, Gary. So I'll try and answer the 3 questions. Why did the United Church pick the GLI as a national priority? Way back in 1972 and again in 86, the United Church of Canada passed a resolution supporting a guaranteed basic livable income for people below the poverty line. And the resolutions went nowhere. And the membership didn't even know that we passed those motions. I wonder how many of you on this call know that it's nothing new. It's been in our church policy since 1972. The Anglicans and Lutherans passed similar motions and nothing happened. So in September, I got a call from a staff person at the United Church, and they're trying a new thing because, you know, we're very good at passing resolutions and then nothing happens. So they established 8 task forces, of which ours is one, to see what can be done to animate United Church members across the country and to really take personal action instead of just, you know, putting your hand up and saying, I'm all in favor and not doing anything. So that's how it started. I'm not sure why it was picked as national priority, except to say that COVID has, you know, shown us the cracks in our social system. And one of the huge cracks is people who can't, you know, who are under the poverty line, and it can happen to anybody. Because in this pandemic, you know, you lose your job and you're up a creek. So we thought it was a Kairos time to act on this particular issue. I know that one of the other of the 8 issues is climate change, but there's 7 groups like ours or networks across the country. So we decided to adapt the networking model rather than the, you know, put a resolution through the courts and then go fishing. So that's why it was picked. Secondly, what does it hope to achieve? Well, the mandate I was given is that our mandate is to create awareness, to educate, to bear public witness, and to advocate for the guaranteed livable income with United Church people and get them to do this. So it's very much focused on our own constituency to get us off the resolution method and into the networking model where you take action yourself. So if we, you know, according to the number of United Church people, we can get off their butts, that will be the measure of our success. Who are we collaborating with? That's a little bit slower because we have not emphasized this, because we need to animate the United Church members first and then get them to do the collaboration. I mean, we can easily phone the primate of the Anglican Church and they would go, I mean, all the bishops have signed this letter and so on, but that isn't what we're wanting. We're wanting grassroots United Church people to reach out to their neighbors in faith and create the collaboration. There is some, however, going on. We collaborate, of course, with Senator Kim Pate in the Senate. And in fact, she was the ones who got us going on this. I'm the liaison of our committee, of our network with an organization called Basic Income Canada, and they're going to turn it into an NGO and call it Friends of Basic Income, which you can join for a few dollars. I think they have a staff person, so they're going that NGO route for a more permanent kind of structure. And they've got people right across the country. Our United Church network in Peterborough has reached out to their local synagogue and they're collaborating. This next week, a Roman Catholic friend of mine has got a webinar organized by the Jesuits, the Jesuit Forum, and and she's hoping to kind of emulate our model. So she's not going to the bishop or the archbishop. She says they'll block it or they won't do anything. So she says, we're going to go to the Roman Catholic female orders because they don't have to ask permission of anybody to do things. And that looks very, very promising too. In Peterborough, they've got a very interesting collaboration going on with people in poverty. And they're training United Church people who are mostly middle class to really relate to and be able to speak and listen with people below the poverty line. So those are some of the collaborative things we've done so far. I expect that'll pick up because we've now got networking committees in or contacts in every province and every territory. And so that we're a little stronger now within the United Church than we were in September. Third thing is, what actions has the United Church taken? Well, we've taken, first of all, recruiting members, which is the toughest part. I mean, you know, you have to convince people this is a worthy cause, that it's worth their time, and how to do it, and then do some education with them so they understand what it's about, deal with some of the objections, and carry on from there. So that takes quite a bit of time. Apart from that, Judah Barry Morris, mainly, the United Church across the country organized vigils on April the 8th, which was the Liberal Party policy time. And they organized vigils outside MPs' offices where there'd been some contact beforehand. So they were met by either the MP or by their staff. And this was accompanied by letters. There were over 50 vigils held across the country, but many more letters written. Now that sounds impressive, but you've got to remember there are 154 MPs in Canada. We've only contacted 50 of them. So we're only a third of the way. There's a long way to go still there. We've had many educational webinars such as this one, sponsored locally by United Church people across the country, and that's all to the good. And that'll continue. We're providing lawn signs for any churches or individuals that want them. That'll be up next week, and also bumper stickers. On October 17th, which is the UN Sunday for the Eradication of Poverty, we're asking all United Church congregations across the country to join in a service which we focused on the need for a guaranteed livable income. And that's under the leadership of Hal Llewellyn, who's in Nova Scotia, and Susan Eagle in Ontario. So we're moving along. We also have good contacts in Ottawa. One of our young members, he's in his 20s, is a member of the Young Liberals of Canada, and he keeps us in touch and up to date with what's happening within the Liberal caucus, which at this point is some interest, but no policy, nothing of a policy nature yet. So it's a long way to go. I keep reminding people that, you know, it took over 20 years to get Medicare. It came from a province, and PEI has an all-party request to the federal government for a pilot project on guaranteed livable income in that province. It has the advantage then of not being canceled should the government change. But so far, the feds have not really responded. So we don't know why or what's going on there. I urge people who had written their MP to write them again and thank them for the Liberal budget and the promise of daycare, which we hope to get soon, and hoping that the next progressive legislation will be around the guaranteed livable income. So that's pretty well what we're doing, and I hope it gives you some idea of the extent and of our networking and what we're doing, but also the challenge that lies ahead and the need for a sustained commitment to this cause. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen probably for several years, but we're used to that, so we'll hang in.
Thank you so much, Lois. That was really comprehensive, and I think it gives us a good, clear picture. I'd like it less than 20 years or 25 years, but we'll see. And because the senator is here and she is doing this in between meetings, I'm wondering if we could invite Rebecca to introduce her, and let's hear from her particular set of actions that she's engaged in.
All right, thank you so much, Rhian. We are so grateful to introduce Senator Kim Pate today. I'll give her a little introduction. Senator Kim Pate was appointed to the Senate of Canada in 2016. She continually works extensively in support of women, particularly women with intersectional identities, in roles such as the Executive Director of the Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Societies. Recently, Senator Pate spearheaded a group of 50 senators to send an open letter to the Prime Minister calling for a minimum basic income. That was in April 2020. We'd like to thank you again for joining us today, Senator Pate, and we invite you to speak on what your personal interest is in the GLI, what actions you are encouraging the Senate to take, and what are some of the common questions you face when people ask why you supported GLI. I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me. And I apologize. I've got the Senate on this other screen because we're actually debating the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and that vote will hopefully happen, and it will hopefully be law by the end of today. So fingers crossed, everybody. I come to you from the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, otherwise known to many people as Ottawa. I'm actually in my office on Parliament Hill, not in the Senate, because some of our colleagues are not wearing masks, and I refuse to subject the staff to that. And I want to thank, in particular, it's such an honor to be on this panel with you, Senator Wilson. I still think of you. You have been such an amazing inspiration to so many of us, me included. And it's your leadership that really I emulate when I try to do this work. 50 years ago this year, the Senate actually introduced the first call for guaranteed livable income in the Kroll report, in a report looking at poverty issues in Canada. At the same, during the same period, the Status of Women Commission issued a call that included, as well as childcare, which we are hearing about now, a call for also a basic income. The Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report, tabled last year, also called for a guaranteed livable income. And it's no accident that the report we just tabled today on the human rights of prisoners in this country also includes the importance of looking at economic, health, and social equality, as well as obviously racial and gender equality. And so my interest in this, in fact, it was the entire reason when I was approached by different folks, including one who sent me a message today, to have my name stand, because many of you will know the first process was a nomination process for the Senate when current Prime Minister Trudeau decided to try and make the Senate a more independent body. My main reason was that the work I had been doing was really important, and I continue to do, working with some of the most marginalized, victimized, criminalized, and institutionalized in this country, particularly through the prisons. And I've worked, as many of you know, with young people, men, and for the 25 years before I was appointed with women. But you know, that work is really important. But in order to really decolonize, decriminalize, and decarcerate, we have to look at the ways in which our prisons get used as the default for all those people who don't enjoy equality for all kinds of reasons, intersectional reasons. And so it was that really drove me to the Senate. And in fact, I intended my first speech to be about guaranteed livable income, and some very kind, you know, my colleagues now and former colleagues of Senator Wilson took me aside and said, yeah, it might sound a bit way out there to talk about guaranteed livable income. This was in 2016 when I was appointed. So instead I talked about the need to decarcerate and the over-incarceration of Indigenous women. Well, in February of last year, I decided, you know, if 3 years on in the Senate, if I couldn't talk about it now, then there was not much point in me staying doing this work, because, you know, I have another, I was appointed actually on my birthday, my 57th birthday. And if I don't cark it or quit before, I'll be kicked out, as you know, on my 75th. And so I thought, you know, I have to get working on this because the time is ticking. And now I have, at that time, 14 years to try and get this done. So I started an inquiry in the Senate, which basically is, for those of you who don't know that, you know, what does that mean in the Senate? Well, it basically means you toss out an idea and say, I'm interested in this. Any of the rest of you interested? And then, you know, fewer than 3 weeks later, we had a pandemic declared, and suddenly what looked like a way out idea to a lot of people suddenly looked like an important idea. And within a matter of a couple of months, as you've already mentioned, 50 senators signed on, and we wrote urging the government to take what it had learned from implementing the CERB, the emergency benefit, and pivot to develop a guaranteed livable income. Well, we're not there yet, but the momentum continues to grow. And in fact, in the plan, the National Action Plan that Minister Bennett just tabled on the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, it does include the guaranteed livable income and the need to develop a plan. So that's the first we have seen the government actually do this. As well, Julie Dershowitz, a member of parliament, a Liberal member of parliament, has introduced a private bill. Now, who knows when we're likely to rise within the next week, or even by the end of this week. And there's all indication is that the government is working up towards an election. So we're not likely to see that bill pass, but it signals that that is an interest. And you mentioned the young Liberals. Well, kudos to all of the folks who ensured that guaranteed livable income, basic income, was the #1 policy issue at the convention this year. And so all momentum is moving in that area. And I think it requires the push now of all of us to remind our members of parliament and the senators who represent each of our regions and provinces, that this is something people want every party to consider, and I think try and make it part of the election platform. Leah Gazan from the NDP also is interested in this, has been promoting it. And Annamie Paul from the Green Party was already on side with this before she became leader of the Green Party. The bloc it's less clear, but certainly I see no reason why we couldn't be proceeding with this kind of initiative and really putting the push on during any election campaign and insisting that it be one of the initial action items when we get back, because it is just unconscionable to me, and I know all of you, that during this pandemic, as we have seen the intersections of race, class, gender result in the most harsh health outcomes, the most detrimental living circumstances, and the most challenging economic circumstances have all been in communities where the highest levels of poverty are, where they're more racialized, and where the challenges of being able to actually adhere to health guidelines have been most problematic. As well, we know that the Yukon Territory has already indicated an interest, and PEI, the Premier, has actually written and spoken to the Prime Minister about wanting to start the implementation process. We're calling it piloting the implementation, not implementing a pilot. And, that may sound like semantics, but I think it's vitally important that most of us are well past wanting to see any more pilots. We want to actually see this implemented. And as Senator Wilson, Lois has already said, much like Medicare, which started in Saskatchewan, everybody said it was expensive. Everybody said we couldn't do it. And yet as it rolled out, nobody has ever been game to roll back on that. And I think it's much the same with guaranteed livable income. And all of the economic arguments for me are specious. Poverty costs us an awful lot. Incarcerating people, predominantly those who are not wealthy, and certainly live in all kinds of economic deprivation before they're imprisoned and after. All of that costs us, hundreds of billions of dollars a year that we never ever question. And so I think it's time that we demand that those resources be reallocated in ways that everybody in this country, Canada's a rich country in terms of resources, human resources, financial resources, natural resources. And there's no reason that in a responsible, in terms of the planet, in terms of the environment, but also in terms of people, way that we can't ensure that everybody is fed, clothed, housed, and educated. And last year when I was having this discussion with a woman from Finland, I was reminded that oil was discovered in Finland about the same time as it was discovered in Alberta. And the response was so very different. Finland invested all the resources in the people, and they now have a situation where they could actually pay out a stipend to every single person in the country from now until they died, based on the way that they have allocated those resources. And I'm told that if you go to the most remote fjord in the country, you can access healthcare, education, clean water. And I think, we should be able to say the same thing about Canada, but that's certainly not what we've done with our natural resources to date. So I'm hopeful with the UN Declaration coming into law. I'm hopeful with the pushes of Indigenous communities. I'm hopeful with the pushes of communities like yours, that we will continue to see development in a way that honors coming out of this pandemic with other than a GDP measure alone, but that we talk about human development and sustainable development goals as a measure of how we're doing.
Thank you so much, Senator. That was really helpful, and we bless and honor the work that you're doing. I wondered if you're able to stay just a teeny bit longer. I'm just going to see if we have any questions from the floor. We'll take a pause, and Lois and Kim are right here. So it'd be nice to see if there's any initial questions before we start talking about some of the specifics that Harvey will present, and then some of the lived experience that Jodi's going to share. So using the chat, using your raised hand, Rebecca and Sarah will be looking for anyone who has some initial questions. We're all holding them for the very end, it looks like. And that is just fine. Senator, I know you have to go, but thank you so much for joining us and helping us get educated and inspired as we continue to support you doing this work and take on some of it ourselves as well.
Well, thank you so very much. And I'm sorry, I mean no disrespect by zooming in and zooming out. And I thank you for all your incredible work. And thank you, Lois, for your leadership and for continuing to inspire me and so many others.
Great. Thank you.
Take good care.
Take care. And Lois, hopefully you're staying with us till the bitter end of this.
There was a question there
Oh, I missed
from Sheila asking how to connect with the senator.
And I think maybe we'll save that one to the end, and then Barry can speak to that at the end. That would be great. Barry, can I call on you to introduce Harvey?
By all means, my pleasure, Rhian. Thanks very much. I really enjoyed Lois and Kim. I mean, I'm almost moved to tears. I'm delighted to introduce my friend Harvey. We are personal friends, thankfully. I've known Harvey since the 1970s. We met through a summer of service project that he was supervising students in the Toronto and/or Montreal areas, but I really got to know him best when I moved to Winnipeg to work with the St. Matthew's Maryland Community Ministry, where he and others had founded a community ministry combining St. Matthew's Anglican and Maryland United Churches. And what a wonderful experience that was. And Harvey was he's one of the founding members for that. He was on the board of directors. He even leaned on me in a friendly but firm way to get a haircut more than once. And I just enjoyed watching him, knowing about his work as a working sociologist with the Social Planning Council in Winnipeg. He later became a part of the provincial government. I think it was the planning secretariat or one of their offshoots. I know he had something to do with the original Mincome Manitoba experiment in the early to mid 1970s in Manitoba. Then, but also in terms of analysis of the data that had been collected but not thoroughly analyzed since. And he's done a lot of things. He's advised and resourced our National Guaranteed Livable Income Advocacy Group more than once, including working up a very sensible and helpful working paper that Rhian, you alluded to a few minutes ago. And, he was recently advised and worked with Lois mentioned the Prince Edward Island situation. He advised them on a lot of their stuff, technical and policy. So I'm delighted that Harvey's with us, Rhian, and I'll turn it over to him. I sent him the questions, reminded him of those in an earlier email today, but I think he's been also advised of that before. But what is a guaranteed livable income, Harvey? What do we mean by livable income? What would it cost to provide the program? And how could it possibly be funded? Probably our major objection, politically speaking. What are the current barriers to implementing the program, and what are the benefits? Please, Harvey, I'm waiting.
Thank you. It gives me particular pleasure to be able to be here today because I've been fighting 2 types of cancer for the last year and a half, and I spent last week in the hospital being treated for a very adverse reaction to the immunotherapy that I'm on. And so it's left me very, very aware of the fragility of life, of my life in particular, and feeling that perhaps there isn't much longer that I'll be here. So given those realities, I'm very grateful for being given the opportunity to share with you some of the things that I've learned about a basic guaranteed in their livable income. I've also had the good fortune of being able to work with Wayne Simpson, a really fine labor economist from the University of Manitoba, and we've co-authored, I think, 3 or 4 papers over the last 10 years, published in the Calgary School of Social Policy, as well as the Canadian Public Policy. And it's with those experiences that I can speak, try to address the questions that have been posed at me today. And as well, I like to say I was the token sociologist on the research team with an Income Manitoba experiment in Manitoba from 73 to 76. That was an incredibly rich experience, and learned so much about the design of a guaranteed income and some of the technical administrative challenges of doing that. So what's a guaranteed livable income? Well, I think for most people, guarantee means that it's not conditioned upon labor force participation. That's the key, usually, conditioning rules for access to welfare. It's a measure of last resort. You have to be shown, well, you either have a disability and that exempts you, or they expect you to get back to work as soon as possible. And if they're enlightened, they will provide income employment training programs. But in contrast, like the original family allowance, like the current OAS and GIS, like the Canada Child Benefit, this would be unconditioned upon labor force participation. But there may be other conditions that people apply. We have to think about citizenship. Would it be available just to somebody who's a Canadian citizenship or a permanent resident or things like that? And if it was just a provincial program, some provinces might want to, let's say, show evidence of living in the province for at least 1 year to discourage lots of in-migration to take advantage of this unique program. But the key thing is not to have a condition of employment or seeking employment imposed upon eligibility for the benefits. And then further eligibility really depends on whether you want a demo-grant, like everybody gets the same payment or every adult gets the same payment. There might be an age condition imposed on this, in which case the level of other income doesn't play a factor, but the typical design is what we call either a negative income tax or a refundable tax credit, in which case you have to have, if you have other income, then it's clawed back. The benefit, the maximum guarantee that's available is then clawed back at a certain tax rate, a certain benefit reduction rate against the value of that other income, such that when it gets to a certain level, you no longer receive a benefit from the guaranteed income program. It's netted out to $0. So in that sense, under that design, there is an income definition of eligibility as well. But in principle, everybody is eligible for the guarantee, but it then gets clawed back at a certain rate as other income rises. Livable, what does that mean? Well, recently, in the last couple of years, I think, the federal government adopted the market basket measure as the official measure of poverty in Canada. And that has a very specific technical definition. It's based on Statistics Canada pricing a pre-fixed basket of goods and services, food, clothing, footwear, housing, transportation, plus a package of other, things like personal needs and communication, et cetera. That's priced individually in each province and within regions within the province, such that if there were to be a national guaranteed livable income, there would have to be a national average of that threshold established. And in preparation for the question and answer document that I prepared for the United Church, I tried to calculate what that national weighted average would be. It's for a reference family of four persons, 2 adults, 2 children. And at the national average, that weighted by the population within each region, I calculated that the national MBM threshold for a family of 4 in 2019 would be $44,860. And then what you do is that's for a family of 4. And to calculate the threshold for other family sizes, you then, to get for a that's, you multiply by the, it's a bit technical, the square root of family size. So the square root of a family of 4 is 2. For a family of 1, it's 1. So you just take half of that 44,860. So for a single person, the threshold in 2019 would be $22,430. And then you multiply that by the square root of family size. So for a 3-person, it's 31,720. For 5-person, it's 2-person, 31,720. 3-person, 38,850. 5-person, 50,155, etc. So that would be my definition of a livable income. It represents the definition of the MBM poverty line. Now, for a single person, I mean, I don't know what your frame of reference is, whether it sounds a lot or a little, but in comparison, for a single person, let's say on welfare in Manitoba, their annual budget is, I think, about $9,600 if they're deemed employable, and if they're disabled, I think it's about $11,000. So that $22,430 is certainly a tremendous improvement over what they would get on welfare. And such would be the case with most other provinces. The Maytree Foundation publishes the annual poverty, the annual social assistance allowances in each province in the country. So that's the first question. The second one was, how much would it cost? Well, that depends on how you design it. I mean, with these things, the devil is in the details, and let's say God is in the details too. Again, for this paper that I developed for the United Church of Canada, I did some calculations. I have this wonderful tool called SPSDM. It was produced by Stats Canada years ago, Social Policy Simulation Database and Model. And it's an extraordinary piece of software. Anyways, you can model all kinds of variations of basic income programs. You can cost them out. You can show the distributive effects. And so using that tool, here's some illustrative numbers. If the guarantee was set at 75% of the market basket threshold, I've just mentioned what those were, and you claw that back at 20%, first dollar of other income, it starts getting clawed back at 20%. About 14.1 million people would qualify, would get benefits, and that would cost 134 billion per year. If you decided to ratchet up the clawback rate, double that to 40%, then the number qualifying would drop to 8.1 million and only cost 58.6 billion. If you increase the guarantee to 100% of the market basket, clawed it back to 20%, then the cost would jump to 237 billion. If you increase the clawback rate to 40%, 10.8 million would qualify, and the cost would be 122 billion. So as you can see, the cost is really dependent upon the design details, the parameters. The PBO recently published an estimate, and I should have looked it up before. I think it was in the order of about 90 or 80 billion. And it also depends in terms of paying for it, like how many other transfer programs do you replace with the guaranteed livable income? Well, typically you get rid of the provincial social allowances programs because your benefits are going to dominate what they provide. Nationally, the GST credit, not necessarily the Canada Child Benefit, because a number of these designs say, okay, we leave the Child Canada Benefit in place, and that addresses the child portion of providing an adequate income to families. And so then what we do, we know the seniors are already covered off with OAS and GIS and spousal allowance. So what we do is we design a basic income just for the adult, the 18 to 64 adult population. And I like that demographic focus because it's the single adult, non-elderly, who suffers from the highest poverty rate and the highest depth of poverty of any demographic group in the country. And they're the least well served. I mean, the only things they qualify are welfare, GST credit, the working income tax benefit. That's about it. And well, EI if they qualify. So that's the group that really, really needs. That's where the gap is for me, and they should be the target. No, I lost my train of thought. So that's the kind of the cost. Oh yeah, I was simply going to say that the cost really depends on then which other programs do you fold into the guaranteed livable income. Well, in my example, it's really only the GST credit at the federal level in the provincial social assistance benefits that you would really fold into where you'd save the money. The rest of them you'd be leaving alone because this is a supplement to the existing income security network. The benefits.
Harvey, could we ask you to kind of roll on just to the other couple of questions and just kind of summarize them?
Okay, remind me then.
Yeah, no, by all means. I mean, and I, for one, really appreciate the detail that you've covered. You certainly can't be faulted for sweeping generalizations. And forgive me for interrupting, but it's along the lines of what are the current, I think the main one is what are the current barriers to implementing such a program? I mean, you've been working hard and long, both as a civil servant and a good one for many years in different contexts, as well as advising politicians, like most recently in the Maritime provinces.
Well, in the context of the COVID, I mean, currently it's just the massive federal deficit that's been incurred in fighting that. I think that's a big one. I mean, yeah, the appetite for introducing new permanent programs and how you pay for them. You know, that's a big preoccupation. But I think that can be addressed. And the strategy there might be doing incrementally. I mean, if you start off with a low guarantee, low tax back rate, that's not going to cost a lot, and then you increment that. That's one strategy for addressing it. But I think if you look at the Liberals' report in 2018, their poverty reduction plan, it's really clear they don't have an appetite for a guaranteed program for the working age adult population. No, they really want to incentivize them to work. That really is or to provide in-kind benefits, childcare, housing, healthcare. That's their preferred method of dealing with this. And unfortunately, the recent BC expert panel report kind of concluded the same thing, that you'll do better by making reforms to the current welfare program. So I think I see those as the larger impediments to getting this adopted by the governments of the day.
Thank you, Harvey. Sorry, we just want to have some time for Jean, and the document that you sent will circulate. It's really helpful in breaking this down. So I'm very grateful for it. Judith, I just want to turn you over to introducing Jodi so we can hear a bit about the lived experience of the short pilot in Ontario.
Okay. Jodi Dean is a Hamilton, Ontario resident who participated in the Basic Income Pilot project launched in that project, our province, in 2017. Some of Jodi's experiences are mentioned in a new book by Elena Empower and Jamie Swift entitled The Case for Basic Income, Freedom, Security, and Justice. We thank Jodi for sharing her lived experience with us today. Over to you, Jodi.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here to talk to you about my experience with lived basic income. I was a basic income participant in the Ontario Basic Income Pilot. When the pilot first came to Hamilton, I was leery because, it seemed too good to be true. We were working poor, and I really didn't think that it was an option for us. We got a little bit of push from some of our community supporters out there to try and apply anyway. So we did. The process of applying for basic income was very simple. The people that were there to support you through, it was a one day, you go to the clinic, they help you fill out your paperwork. That was that. We were very shocked when we were accepted into the pilot program and we're receiving money each month. Now, half the pilot program received income, half of it didn't, and we were on the half that received income. When we first started the pilot program, my husband was working full time. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have a special needs daughter. So we were allotted about $300 a month roughly at that time, which may not seem like it's a lot to some people, but when you're living in poverty, $300 a month is a big deal. For us, it made the difference in our lives for simple things like we have a lot of doctor's appointments and hospital appointments. So it allotted us to buy passes monthly to make sure if there was an emergency, we had parking covered, because we had instances in the past where, sometimes an emergency with my daughter, it's $25 to get in and out of that parking lot. And we didn't always have that kind of money. During the time that we were on the basic income pilot, my husband got hurt at work and our income dropped drastically. The difference between this and any other type of assistance, and I've never myself been on the welfare system, but I know the paperwork and I've helped people try and navigate through it, is that I called basic income. They asked me to send them the information and they increased our monthly amount by about $1,700. That simple phone call, that was all it took. Sending the information made it so that we didn't lose our home, that we still had the ability to purchase food and, the stress from not having to worry while he was trying to recuperate from his injury and his illness. So the changes in our lives from basic income meant that we went from a survival mode to a living mode. We are able to afford little extras. So my daughter goes to physiotherapy once a week. And of course, they have the little stores right out front. And each time after physiotherapy, she'll say, "Mom, can I have a smoothie?" And it's really crappy to be able to say, "We can't afford that healthy drink for you because a smoothie could cost 2 loaves of bread or a bag of milk." To be able to say yes meant the world. It meant it to me because I got to say yes, and it meant it to her because she got that little treat after working so hard. While we were accepting the basic income, I also was able to finish my degree in social work, all of my coursework. So that was one of the big things that I did do while we were on. It was a plan that I completely finished. I still have to go and do my in-person, but COVID hit. So my work time is not done yet, but once COVID is better, then hopefully we'll be able to figure out a way to afford that so that I can completely graduate. But all of my coursework was done while on basic income. I know several participants in the basic income program in Hamilton, and I know from seeing it with my own eyes, the change it made in people. From allowing people to go back to school, to get better education, to get a better job, to allowing people the freedom to maybe go from 3 jobs to 2 so they could work on their physical and mental health. In some cases, basic income helped people get out of toxic situations and living situations. They were able to achieve stable housing. Those are just some of like the few things that I can tell you right off the top of my head that are things that happened to people amongst me while we were on basic income. And I can honestly say that I do not know anybody who didn't make life choices to improve while they were on basic income. Choices that they were unable to make prior to basic income because, well, you're in survivor mode, and the lack of income and stability doesn't allow you to think really much further than the next day. You can't think a year ahead when you're trying to figure out how to get through today. It gave people dignity and empowered them. Those are huge things. It empowered them to be able to make the choices that could improve their future. I think that with the pandemic, though, we can see the real need for the universal basic income. I'd like to see the federal government put one in place sooner than, I know I hear the talk of 20 years and I think, no, because, you know, this has been going on for way too long. And we see with Mincome and even our pilot in Ontario, we see what that actually change makes. And when we talk about cost of the pilot, the cost of losing the pilot here in Ontario, one of my friends lost their life. They lost their life because the difference in living that little bit, and I know we just heard about the differences in income. So for Ontario, it's about $1,200 a month, going to about $2,000 a month if you're on disability. Going back to that without warning was devastating. This is a life-changing thing for people, and it helps you to, again, my words, go from surviving to living, and that is a big difference. Through the pandemic, everybody, you know, heard about CERB. Well, what is CERB? CERB is a universal basic income. I must add that my husband went back to work right before the pandemic hit, and we collected CERB because he was 10 hours short of getting unemployment insurance. So without CERB, my family would not have survived. We would not have been able to pay the mortgage. It just wouldn't have happened. CERB was just as easy as the basic income pilot was to get started. And if the government can manage that in such a quick time, I think with some thought, they really, really could make this work for everybody. Also already spoken, we already have 2 basic incomes. We have the old age security and the child tax credit. Those are basic incomes that have been in place for years. So you know what, if we can do it with them and we could do it with CERB, I do not see why we cannot do that for everybody. Everybody deserves to feel like they are living life, not just surviving. We know these programs work, and we know they're easily maintained and they're easily administered. The next thing we need for the government to do is make sure that everyone living in Canada can have a basic income. Thank you.
Jodi, thank you. You know, you're in a room with a lot of preachers and we're all going preach.
Okay.
Yeah, that was so helpful. We're extremely grateful for you sharing the personal story. We know it's a risk and a cost, but you've really moved our hearts and brought it to life for us. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really grateful.
Very welcome. And any questions, I honestly do feel there's nothing too personal to ask me about this because I think a lot of times with basic income also, there's a lot of stigma. And that's what we're trying to break as well. The stigma of why people need a universal basic income. It's not because they don't want to work. It's not because they don't work. It's the stigma needs to change so that people can, you know, take this on and we can win this battle with the government.
Thank you, Jodi. Well said. So folks, we're coming to 2 o'clock, and I just want to go through the 3 actions that we're inviting you to consider today. So the first thing is something that Lois mentioned. We as the United Church are being asked to write a letter from ourselves as congregation members, our whole congregation, ideally with partners, to write a letter to our MP or to the Prime Minister. Why not do all of them at the same time? And to our Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Christian Freeland. And there is a template for this. So this is a fast and easy way to do this. The link is in the chat. The link is also on the Guaranteed Livable Income section of the United Church of Canada website. this is something that we could engage our congregations in at coffee hour when we do this blessed return in person and online. So that's action number 1. Action number 2 is what Lois mentioned again too, that on October 17th, it's the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. And the wider church is asking all of us who are in worship leadership to make our sermon about this topic. And there's going to be a ton of materials on the site to help people prepare for that, including some lawn signs so we can really make ourselves visible and make our churches centers of places where people can get involved in this particular action. So that is action number 2. And then action number 3 is if you felt inspired and want to work collectively in BC on this issue, then Rebecca and Sarah are inviting you to sign up and join Barry and Judith, Rebecca, Sarah, Gary, and I, and everyone else, just to get a bit of a collective, a network going, a cluster going. What are we calling them these days, Treena? One of those, so that we can share.
This would be a network.
A network, thank you. Energy and ideas. So that link is in there too. Treena, are we able to send this out through the PMR at some point with the document from Harvey? Is that at all possible?
Sure, yeah, just send it to Mauricio and he'll get it sent out.
Okay,
or to Tressa.
Thank you so much. I want to take a moment to thank Sarah and Rebecca and Barry in particular for putting this together, and Barry for finding these tremendous speakers, and for always being a prophet in our time. So thank you very much. And I just want to quickly introduce Jane Dawson, who's our the PMR social justice convener. She's still here if she can wave or unmute, but she has just joined us. Treena announced that at the AGM. And we're all here, Jane. We're looking forward to working with you in any way and in any capacity. So folks who want to stick around briefly for any quick questions can do that, but I think it is the end of our time, correct, Treena?
It is. If folks need to go, they can, but if you all are willing to hang around and answer questions, if folks have questions, then they can hang around and they can be answered for everyone to hear. We just want to honor the end time for those who do have another commitment at 2, but if people want to hang around, there can be some conversation happen.
Great. Thank you. Thanks again.
Well, and I want to thank you all for this amazing offering. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone have questions?
Anyone have any questions?
You can raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask.
I've got one question of Harvey Stevens, if I might, if he's still on. I hope he hasn't punched out.
Yeah, he's still here.
No, I'm here.
If there's one thing you would want to stress that you didn't get a chance to, what would it have been? What would it be?
I don't know, Barry. Sorry.
Sure you do.
No,
Okay. Well, listen, thank you for your presence and for your work at Young United Community Ministry. Harvey's on the board there, and I think he's even the treasurer. I'm not sure, but he has a significant responsibility. Blair just said.
Thank you, Barry. One of the hopeful things I wanted to share with people is that this colleague of mine, Wayne Simpson, he's associated with the Calgary School of Social Policy, and there's an animator in Calgary, Lee Stevens. Anyways, she was the one that got the Calgary School of Social Policy to engage us to do a basic income proposal for Alberta. And she's brought us back together and asked us to develop a paper in response to the BC expert panel's report, contesting their conclusion that a basic income isn't the way to go. And I'm encouraged by this. We've only begun to have conversations, but there's some really fine minds in that group. And I'm hoping I'll be able to work with Wayne on kind of doing the modeling work to develop a solid response to the conclusions of that panel and show that how a basic, a guaranteed livable income can be introduced in Canada. So I wanted to pass that along to you. It may be a year before that document is published, but I'm hoping it's in the process in the near future.
Thanks, Harvey.
Any other questions? If not, then thank you so much to our speakers. Really appreciate it. It was a wonderful, enlivening hour. So thank you so much. And Harvey will be praying for you as well. Thank you for sharing your.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody.
Okay.